The small Italian restaurant was quiet that evening, filled with the soft clinking of glasses and low conversations. Lena Marino moved carefully between the tables, her eyes mostly lowered, her voice soft whenever she spoke to customers. She was known by the staff as the shy waitress who barely talked and always kept to herself. No one knew much about her past, and she seemed happy keeping it that way. Suddenly the restaurant door opened, and the atmosphere instantly changed. Conversations faded, and a cold tension filled the room. A group of well-dressed men walked in, their presence heavy with authority. At their center was Don Alessandro Moretti, one of the most feared Mafia bosses in the city. Even the owner quickly rushed forward to greet him with nervous respect. Lena froze for a moment when the manager told her to serve their table. Her hands trembled slightly as she walked over, clutching her small order pad. Don Alessandro sat calmly, his sharp eyes studying every detail around him. When Lena reached the table, she softly asked for their order. Instead of answering, Alessandro leaned back and asked her a strange sentence in an old Sicilian dialect. It sounded like an ordinary question, but it was actually an ancient Mafia code used decades ago to test loyalty between powerful families. The guards around him immediately watched her closely. For a moment Lena stood still. Then she quietly replied with the exact traditional response. The effect was instant. Chairs stopped moving. Conversations died. Several men reached toward their weapons. Don Alessandro slowly stood up, staring at the shy waitress in disbelief. No ordinary waitress should have known that answer. The room had suddenly become very, very cold. For several long seconds, no one in the restaurant moved. The silence felt heavy, like the air itself had frozen. Don Alessandro continued staring at Lena as if he had just seen a ghost. His men shifted uneasily around the table, some already resting their hands near their jackets where their weapons were hidden. Lena realized what had happened the moment she saw their expressions. Her calm reply had exposed something she had spent years trying to hide. She quickly lowered her eyes again and held her order pad tightly, pretending nothing unusual had happened. "Where did you learn that phrase?" Alessandro finally asked, his voice low but sharp. Lena hesitated. I don't know what you mean, sir," she replied softly. The boss leaned forward slightly, studying her face more carefully now. That response she gave him was not something someone could guess. It was part of an old Sicilian loyalty code once used between a few powerful Mafia families decades ago. Only blood members were ever taught it. One of Alessandro's guards suddenly stepped closer to Lena, clearly suspicious. The other customers in the restaurant quietly watched from a distance, sensing the tension but not understanding it. Lena felt her heart beating faster. Every instinct told her to leave immediately. "I'm just a waitress," she said quietly. "Would you like to order?" Instead of answering, Alessandro slowly stood up from his chair. His tall figure cast a shadow over the small table. "You're not just a waitress," he said calmly. Before Lena could react, two of his men moved to block the restaurant doors. The room had turned into a trap. Lena's eyes flickered toward the doors the moment the men blocked them. Her breath caught in her throat, but her face stayed calm. Inside, panic rose like a storm she had spent years trying to bury. The other customers sensed the danger and quietly returned to their tables, pretending not to notice anything. No one wanted trouble with men like these. Don Alessandro slowly walked around the table and stopped a few steps away from Lena. His dark eyes studied her carefully, searching for something hidden behind her quiet expression. "Look at me," he said. Lena hesitated for a moment, then slowly lifted her eyes. For the first time, Alessandro saw something different in them, something that didn't belong to a shy waitress. There was awareness there, and caution. "You answered a question that only a few families in Sicily ever knew," he continued. "That code disappeared almost 20 years ago." Lena stayed silent. One of the guards stepped closer, clearly losing patience. "Boss, she's lying. Nobody learns that phrase by accident." Alessandro raised a hand slightly, signaling the man to stay back. His focus never left Lena. "Tell me your name," he said. "Lena," she replied quietly. "Lena what?" Another pause. "Lena Marino." The name hit the room like a sudden shockwave. One of the older men beside Alessandro suddenly stiffened, his face turning pale. He whispered something into the boss's ear. Alessandro's expression slowly darkened. The Marino family had been wiped out 20 years ago in a brutal massacre that shook the Mafia world. There were no survivors. Yet the young woman standing in front of him carried their name, and knew their secret code. The moment Lena said her last name, the tension in the restaurant thickened like a storm about to break. Don Alessandro did not speak right away. His sharp eyes stayed locked on her face, studying every small reaction, every breath she took. Around them, his men exchanged uneasy looks. The name Marino was not something people said lightly. It belonged to a powerful crime family that had been completely destroyed 20 years ago in a bloody betrayal that shook the entire underworld. One of the older guards leaned closer to Alessandro and whispered, "Boss, the Marino family had a daughter. She disappeared the night of the massacre." Lena heard the words and felt a cold shiver run through her chest. She had spent her whole life trying to bury that name, trying to become someone invisible. Just a quiet waitress who served food and went home. But now the past had caught up with her. Alessandro stepped closer, lowering his voice. "How old are you, Lena?" 24, she answered softly. The boss did a quick calculation in his mind. The Marino massacre happened almost exactly 20 years ago. The timeline was too perfect to ignore. "You expect me to believe this is a coincidence?" he asked. "I didn't say anything about the Marino family," Lena replied carefully. One of the guards suddenly grabbed her arm. "Enough lies." Before anyone expected it, Lena reacted. Her hand twisted sharply, breaking the man's grip with surprising speed. The movement was controlled, precise, the kind taught only in serious combat training. The guard stumbled back in shock. Every man in the room instantly reached for his weapon. And Don Alessandro finally realized something chilling. This quiet waitress had been trained. The guard who had grabbed Lena stared at his hand in disbelief, rubbing his wrist where she had twisted free. The movement had been quick, almost effortless, but it carried the precision of someone who had practiced it many times. The other men around the table instantly stepped forward, their hands sliding inside their jackets where their guns rested. The restaurant had fallen completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working, nervously peeking through the doorway. Lena stood still, realizing she had just made a mistake she could not undo. Her breathing slowed as she forced herself to stay calm. Panic would only make things worse. Don Alessandro raised his hand again, stopping his men before they could act. His expression had changed. The shock on his face had been replaced by deep curiosity. "Interesting," he said quietly. He stepped closer to Lena, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "A waitress who knows an ancient Sicilian Mafia code, carries the name Marino, and moves like a trained fighter." He paused for a moment. "That is not coincidence." Lena looked down at the floor, saying nothing. Her silence only confirmed his suspicions. One of Alessandro's men spoke nervously. "Boss, if she really is connected to the Marino family, people will come for her." Alessandro knew the man was right. The massacre of the Marino family had not been random. It was a carefully planned attack by powerful enemies who wanted the entire bloodline erased. If Lena truly survived, then someone out there would want to finish the job. Alessandro looked back at her. "Tell me the truth," he said quietly. "Who taught you to survive?" Lena kept her eyes lowered, but her mind raced. The question hung in the air like a weight pressing down on her chest. Around her, Alessandro's men waited for an answer, their attention sharp and suspicious. She could feel their eyes studying every movement she made. For years she had hidden the truth, building a quiet life where no one asked questions. But standing here, surrounded by men who understood the Mafia world better than anyone, she knew it was becoming impossible to keep pretending. "No one," she finally said softly. The answer sounded weak even to her own ears. One of the guards scoffed. "Nobody trains like that by accident." Don Alessandro did not react to the comment. His gaze remained fixed on Lena, calm but intense, as if he were slowly piecing together a puzzle. "You're afraid," he said quietly. Lena looked up at him, surprised. "Not of us," Alessandro continued. "You're afraid of someone else." His words struck closer to the truth than she expected. For a brief moment, something flickered across her face, something that looked like old fear mixed with anger. Alessandro noticed it immediately. "Who are you hiding from?" he asked. Lena opened her mouth but stopped herself. The memories she had spent years burying suddenly pushed forward, gunshots in the night, shouting voices, fire, and the terrified face of a man telling her to run and never come back. Her fingers slowly tightened around the order pad. "If they find me," she whispered, almost to herself, "people will die." The room grew colder. Because everyone there understood exactly what she meant.